Indie gaming is taking over the industry while AAA studios stagnate with endless sequels and layoffs, is what a lot of people want you to think today. The truth is that the indie gaming renaissance is already upon us, and it seems inevitable. But its heated rivalry with AAA isn't as hot as you think it is. Now, of course, the indie hype is still pretty real right now, and it's not imaginary, because games like R.E.P.O, Peak, Schedule 1, and SILKSONG accounted for a decent chunk of the Steam sales for 2025. All of these games are unique, they feel different, they feel fresh, and they stick with you. Which is why a lot of people seem to think that now it's a battle of the bands for AAA against indie. One of the biggest reasons that AAA doesn't have to really fear them is because AAA doesn't have to really second guess themselves when they're creating games. They maintain their high budgets, pre-orders, and large fan bases around any release they kind of make. People like Rockstar and Nintendo and Naughty Dog don't really have to question whether it's time to release the next big thing. GTA 6 will be a success. It doesn't matter what they do. This is also why a lot of indie games tend to be very unique and they become beloved in their little cult followings because they don't really have any money on the line when they make these risks. Just think about the Chillos Art fan base and the brothers who make it. Would you know who Chillos Art was if you weren't a little bit chronically online and watching YouTubers and streamers like Queso, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye? The main way these indie studios actually grow and build a fan base is through social media. They have Twitter pages, Instagrams, YouTube devlogs, Discord servers, a whole thing on itch, and everything they have to do. They can do everything like that just so that their games will be seen. They also have a lot of marketing on Reddit, subreddits a lot, that it seems like the big guys don't really have to do. They can just put commercials and ads on their YouTube videos from other people, and you will eventually hear about the next GTA or the next big The Last of Us kind of game. If I had time, I would get into Nintendo's practices, business practices, but I'm also kind of scared that if I talk too much about Nintendo, they might somehow take down a video, as they do with everyone, because they're a little bit aggressive. But they don't even have to worry about their public image very much anymore because Nintendo is just synonymous with Mario and good gaming. Now, of course, you already kind of know about the largest indie games of the year that accounted for about a quarter of Steam sales, but what about the other 75%? And what about games that aren't sold just through Steam or itch? It seems like when you look at the bigger picture, AAA studios kind of still out-earned and just they garnered a larger fan base and more attention than all of the indie games of 2025. Basically, it seems like a game like Hollow Knight SilkSong is a cultural moment, but then still, when I look up the top games of the year, all that comes up is Battlefield 6, NBA 2K, Call of Duty, and all that kind of stuff. Indie games are winning awards, they're having community events, they are in Discord servers across the world, and are actually finally getting some of the recognition that they deserve. But the key point here is that it's a matter of scale. Even the most successful indie teams are small compared to AAA studios. But it's not a huge surprise, right? I mean, it almost sounds redundant. Just try and make a point here to help you guys understand that there are levels to success and that there still exists a huge wage gap between the underdogs and the Naughty Dogs of the gaming scene. Now, for something a little more interesting and a little more obvious, indie developers don't usually set new trends. They take notes, they iterate, and then they iterate upon dozens of other iterations and work with limited tools and money to squeeze out these gems. But ultimately, they're usually inspired by at least some AAA giants and how they found success first. I'm not making the point here that no truly original ideas ever really exist or no art is ever truly original. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the mechanics, polish, and artistic style of AAA slowly trickles down into indie. It's not really a true David versus Goliath story because even indie teams often have multiple departments and like budgets, and I would almost call them like some indie game studios that were publishing things independently, such as, I don't know, Hades, right? They're almost a pseudo AAA studio without the production company behind it. What I mean is basically, I'm not hating. I love indie games and I don't really play that many AAA games, believe it or not. But I just think that I've noticed that a lot of the top ones that are winning all these awards and being, kind of the indie darlings are not tiny little studios or teams like Chilla's Art or Fears to Fathom. A lot of AAA games that succeeded tend to kind of become a part of the cultural zeitgeist forever. Indie game studios and teams build off of that nostalgia and what they grew up with to make something unique. So who's really keeping indie games in business? Who in their right mind is marketing them, reviewing them, and praising all these indie games for free? Streamers. Big YouTubers and streamers are keeping indie games alive. They're the people who put the majority of these tiny teams on the map, and most of us wouldn't know who they are without someone like Markiplier or Corey playing the game first. The worst part is that when a streamer plays your indie game that is, really tiny, has a small team, cost you, I don't know, maybe $500 to make, and you didn't have any kind of marketing budget, they will out earn you in the tens of thousands. When someone like Markiplier or Jacksepticeye plays a really small indie game that has no hype or community around it, they might send sales their way, but ultimately they are out earning them to the tune of hundreds of thousands per upload, sometimes even more. What I'm trying to say is that creators literally invest in small, unknown indie teams with their time and spread their vision around to millions. If small devs are a dime a dozen, or just a drop in the ocean, then streamers and YouTubers are the ones holding the reins and controlling the size and duration of that ripple effect. They decide what succeeds. Trusted AAA teams, conversely, could probably throw a game out with little to no marketing and a blackout and still make the charts of the year. I know I'm starting to sound like a real AAA purist fanboy cash cow pay pig, but just hear me out until the end, because I assure you that I, an aspiring solo developer just learning things in Python and C#, am certainly not a purist. In short, indie games and small solo or duo dev teams don't have to beat AAA to matter to me or their intended audience. AAA games don't need to absolutely dominate our hearts and wallets either. Art in all of its various forms matters no matter the scale or recognition, because it just does. There is absolutely nothing wrong with falling in love with low poly Chilla's Art games or Fears to Fathom and Cuphead or the Hollow Knight SILKSONG, and also putting your money and attention towards things like Red Dead Redemption, the next Mario Galaxy or Mario racing game, and basically all of the fun games that you can play with your friends. Art is human, and it is what you want it to be. So I guess me spewing about the earnings and the fan bases and everything like that doesn't really help you get a full picture. the full picture, which is just that AAA studios and indie studios are not in competition. They coexist, and that's fine. Indie studios aren't truly threatening to topple the big AAA guys. They're just asking for a seat at the table. While the smallest and most loyal dev teams are busy gathering wood to carve and build out their own tables and chairs to sit at, the emerging truth is that some standout indie teams are actually succeeding at getting that invite to the table, not from AAA, but from the fans. Indie studios don't really have to go for the jugular and reign supreme over the big guys just to continue creating great games. They tell stories that we all love them for, with a freedom of expression and unhindered creativity that AAA continues to stray so far from. Honestly, every time I read the word AAA, it just reminds me of all the big marching band contests I was watching and sitting through during my entire 7 years of my life. I noticed that they all compete in their own categories, such as 1A with only 50 members, all the way up to 5A and 6A with groups exceeding over 150 members, with complex choreography, props that smaller schools can't replicate or afford to try, and better band directors. Just to put that into scale, the largest single school marching bands to date have exceeded over 700 members and require over 20 coach buses to transport them. The smallest bands are barely hitting 40 participants, and guess what? They both consistently won medals. Ultimately, the size kinda does and doesn't matter. Even small bands win in their respective 1A or 2A or 3A classes, some so small that they play their hearts out all alone in their class 1A and receive roaring applause the whole time. This proves that small teams can and do win, and every day there is more and more proof that indie dev teams too can capture their own little piece of the gaming magic in a bottle. Thank you.